First of all, let me thank you all for having given me an opportunity to present a webinar which would actually talk about the agile transformation of entity, and a couple of these entities roll up to what you call as a project or a program or a portfolio and eventually to an organization. This entire session, we will be talking about the entire agile mindset. And to begin this session, I would like to go ahead and showcase the thought for the day, which I'm sure all of you would have seen from the movie Kung Fu Panda. To a large extent, it actually says if you only do what you have been doing, you will never be better than what you have always been trying to do. In other words, if you try to do something different, you should have that mindset of approaching things with a difference, not just saying that this is how I've been doing it all these days. So if you continue to do whatever you've been doing all these days, you are not going to get anything new. And this slide as such is a very heavy slide. It talks at length about agility, but then I would just want to go ahead and move on towards the next slide, which actually talks about what my credentials are. Essentially, I am an agile transformation coach and an agile transformation architect, and I've had an opportunity to give a presentation in a forum like Scrum Alliance, and now I'm doing it with Knowledgehut. And I'm also a certified project management professional and a certified Scrum professional. This is going to be the agenda for today's discussion. Rules of agility from the human existence and discussion. What it is to define the core strata of transformation, and does transformation actually inculcate the spirit of oneness from a business vertical and a horizontal to a truly cross-functional team. See, this is a very debatable topic. Are we going to be one? And many a time we keep on saying this self-organizing team. Are we truly self-organizing? What is the self-organizing myth all about? How are we going to break the barrier of a proxy self-organizing team to a really self-organizing team? These are some of the topics which we will be elaborating at length in some time from now. And this is what I would like to share as the beginning of human life in the agile perspective. This is actually in relation to what Master Shifu says, the Kung Fu Panda. If you have always been doing what you have always been doing until now, you will never get something different. You should try to think about something different and try to execute things with a difference. If you cannot do that, you will not get something new. And by the way, most of you, I'm sure you would know that gold is just not acquired that easily. It takes a lot of right efforts. In the forthcoming slides, we will try to understand the difference between right efforts and the efforts applied right, the right requirements versus the requirements collected right, and so on and so forth. See, many of these terms are very misleading, but however, we will try to understand what is the fine line of difference between these right efforts and the efforts applied right. This is the core strata of transformation. So essentially, let us try to begin this discussion trying to understand some commonly used terms when it comes to office work on a day in day out basis. A project. For the Project Management Institute, a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique service, offering, service, or transition. See, let's try to understand this. It's a temporary endeavor. In other words, it has a definite start date, it has a definite end date. It is not going to run for eternity. And the outcome of the project has to be unique. So we will not get into the aspects of project management and the finer details of project management, which is just going to be serving as an outline on how we are going to apply the concept of transformation when it comes to a project. What is agility? We keep hearing the agility factor of this entity is high. What does the meaning of an agility? It actually talks about responsiveness, swiftness, and alertness. Why did agility not talk about reactivity? See, essentially we'll say that hydrogen reacts with oxygen to give water. We have never heard of anything saying that hydrogen responds to oxygen. See, essentially reactivity is of a lower level of thinking, and reactivity when applied with sense and behavioral thinking pattern translates itself into responsiveness. And the concept of a self-organizing team essentially talks or dwells more on responsiveness factor. Now let's try to understand something on this concept of a framework. What's a framework? We keep hearing something called as an agile framework, the business framework, and the customer's mindset and this framework. What is a framework? It's an outline specifically given to enact any given philosophy of work or given activity. And in most cases, we are referring to Scrum as a popular framework. Why do we talk about Scrum as a popular framework? It is something that is lightweight. It can be put in action right now. In other words, the activity of Scrum can be started with very minimal effort. So anything with which a business actually talks about executing its action, by virtue of which you will be able to see your desired results within the shortest span of time, is what you call as a framework. And a framework cannot hang in air. It needs a strong business justification, which is also known as a business case. What is this business case? I say that this business case, this business project from the customer needs a strong business case to get executed and to get approval from your finance. Why is this business case very strongly needed? Because the business case refers to assignment of the team members to get done with the work as per the customer's requirements. It also talks about assigning the Scrum Master, your product owner, and all the other vendors, stakeholders, and all the other members who are going to be key participants, who are going to be key components of the execution, and who are going to be part of the value delivering exercise. That's exactly the reason why we need to have a very strong business case. More than ever, we need people from the finance to do apportioning of the funds and the required money for getting the work in place. And that can happen only when there is a strong business case or a business justification present. After all these things, we need to understand the key definition of this word called as transformation. Now, before I get into what this concept of a transformation is all about, let us try to understand something called as a change. Yesterday, I have been going to office by walk. The next day, I have started to go to office by the office transport facility, and then I started to take my personal two-wheeler. What is this actually talking about? I see that there is some level of a convenience that I get when I go from walking to availing the office transport facility. However, the office transport facility is having fixed timelines of operation, and it is not fully favorable when I need to work late night or when I'm going to attend a customer's call and I'm going to talk about some customer's requirement satisfaction. So what do? I avail my personal two-wheeler service or car or whatever the case may apply. So essentially what happens is I have been executing my activities. I've been walking myself all the way to office if the distance is that short, or I have actually availed a transport facility if I wanted to save some time. Next, I used my personal two-wheeler or four-wheeler as the case may apply. What happens? Essentially, what I did yesterday did not give me the result what I actually wanted. Hence, I had to adopt a change in course to avail a transport facility, and that is what you call as a change. A change is actually an alteration from how an entity actually behaves from a condition A towards condition B, because he or she feels there is value in a situation being executed in condition B, because there is some output which I can see for sure and which will be part of my value delivery exercise. Now, supposing I see this office transport facility itself is not providing me value, and I see that this walking to office takes some more time. What do? I avail my two-wheeler service, or I ask my spouse to drop me in the office by a car or whatever, or I can use a prepaid taxi service. In other words, I can have the freedom of time to do the work that I think I can do at my time. So essentially it talks about a alteration in the mindset where I was used to doing activities in a particular fashion or sequence. Now I feel that that particular fashion or sequence is not giving me the result that I really wanted, and hence I had to alter my existing course of action. Now, a series of changes accumulated together in a pattern and eventually cascading into something that is permanent. Mind you, a change is something that is temporary. It can be reverted to its earlier course of action or state of action. We'll be talking more about state and the state chart analysis in another webinar. And today our course will be understanding the concept of the business transformation and how the business transformation is fully relevant to today's business world and why is it actually a buzzword in today's business, right? Now, when I'm talking about a transformation, what is it all about? It is a process of, need I say anything further? That's a picture of a solar eclipse. And let us actually try to relate this to our work, which we have been delivering using user stories of our customer. I would want you to dwell on this slide for about a minute before I get into details of this transformation agenda, because the whole course of the presentation is all about this slide and how it actually becomes relevant to our business agenda and how the minimum viable product actually translates itself into value service delivery, right? So I will give you a minute to dwell on the slide and I will get started in a minute from now. Okay? So essentially, when we talk about a user story, we understand there are 2 or 3 criteria for user stories to be defined. One thing is it needs to have an invest criteria, and second, it needs to be having a deep criteria. What does this invest actually signify? Independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, sizable, and testimable. And next, we talk about this deep criteria. Detailed enough, estimated, emergent, and properly prioritized. Don't you think this entire slide is a manifestation of these 2 criteria? When a customer gives a user story, the entire user story description is a patch of darkness. Somewhere we have team members who come to us and who discuss and then say, hey, I think there is something which I can see in this user story. If you are able to get this work done, starting from this location A or location 1, and then gradually as we navigate to location 6, we will be able to get started with one story from where we can deliver value. And that is what you actually call as the beginning of the light at the end of the dark tunnel. So essentially, as you progress, trying to get more and more details from the customer, the whole thing, which was actually a patch of darkness, slowly assumes a small ring. And eventually that ring becomes a bigger diamond ring. And once all the value which we wanted to give our customer is done, the definition of ready translates itself to definition of done. That is exactly what you see as a complete radiance in here. In other words, which of the stories were dark to me, slowly I started doing some progressive elaboration, trying to get more details, trying to understand more and more on what a customer exactly wanted as a requirement, trying to understand which of these areas can actually be delivered, which of these stories cannot be delivered, and what is the strong value criteria behind my not delivering the stories, and where exactly are these impediments. This is what I call as a darkness factor. Now, added to the darkness factor, you need to understand that this formation of the small ring of diamond, which you see as in the dark picture 1, translating itself into a bright picture of sunlight, does not happen overnight. Team members have their own wavelengths and frequencies of learning, understanding, assimilating, and transforming and understanding and imbibing these knowledge entities into what you call as action throughputs. Whatever I keep talking to my team members is of value only when it starts translating itself into value. Otherwise, it is just mere talk, which is devoid of value. Now, as an agile coach or as a coach, your prime responsibility is to work with team who are in regions of darkness. And why do they actually reach out to you? They feel you are the person who can navigate through that scheme of darkness and who can actually show you what light is at the end of the entire service deliveries offer. Now, in all these sections, this darkness factor may give light, may not give light. However, I do during coaching sessions of my team members, I always say that there are no aspects of failure. There are only retrospectives towards success, and there are more and more refined successes. See, the failure as such is a very low word. But however, when I say that I have a retrospective towards becoming successful and I have a retrospective towards becoming even more successful, that eventually translates itself into a diamond ring towards complete luminescence. I can go on in the slide for more than 1 hour, but essentially the takeaway from the slide is, as you navigate more towards this region, which is actually dictated by darkness, a small understanding on how you can deliver value to customer eventually translates itself into showcasing some more light, and more light actually signifies more confidence to customer that you guys can deliver value, and more value delivery, strong story cases can showcase the fact that if I give business to this person, it will translate itself into value, and if it translates itself into value, my return on investment is taken care of. And because my return on investment is taken care of, I want to give this person more and more business. Essentially, the concept of transformation is all about understanding the core strata of a chain reaction, which you will be seeing in the subsequent slides. And with this understanding on transformation, for now, let me actually get more into what the aspect of transformation is all about. As I mentioned, it helps hidden entities to come up into the light, by which I can visualize new action plans for better businesses. It is a clear precursor to the fact that business life can never be the way it used to exist earlier. Now, have we seen any stories as to how business existed the way it was 20 years back? Is it the same today? No. In real life, if I have to say, 20 years back, when I was studying in high school, my only ambition was to stand first in the school race. Today, I am nowhere even thinking, what is a school race and is it even a part of my goal backlog? And 20 years hence, what I think today as priority may not be priority itself. Which means to say that if you look at this picture of the eclipse, the solar eclipse, and the redemption of the eclipse, you can understand that this is the way the typical human mind works. What was actually covered as blackness is what you call as ignorance or ajnana. And as you start understanding more and more on what you are working up, it slowly starts translating itself into knowledge, and accumulated knowledge with which you can see through something which you were not able to do earlier becomes jnana. And jnana in its fullest form is actually called as wisdom. I do not want to dwell more on the philosophical aspect of agile, because agile by itself is a philosophy, and there is another session where we can talk about the philosophical aspects of agile and why agile by itself is a philosophy of the manifestation of the entire universe. However, we will take a leaf out of the book on the entire agile philosophy and try to understand more on the requirement factor after this present slide. Okay. Now, the other key takeaway from that eclipse picture is, it is a guidance factor to individuals and organizations that a collaborative spirit, that collaborative spirit, that line is very important in this presentation. Many a time we keep hearing about customer collaboration, collaborative attitude, collaborative spirit, no cooperation and competition. Why have these words assumed so much of significance today? What is so big a magic about collaboration? Were we not collaborating with customers in our earlier business execution scenarios? The idea is, in a predictive environment, we practically used to discourage change. And because we used to discourage change, customers had to cooperate with we service vendors, or we had to cooperate with customers to ensure that if they brought in changes at a later portion of the business execution, it could be translated into what they saw as delivery. Now, when we are talking about one of the key items in the Agile Manifesto of a collaborative spirit, it is one of the pedigree of business alteration. What is this pedigree? The pedigree actually talks about the lineage of business. If this business needs to exist, if this business is to sustain, if this business has to deliver value, if this business is going to be my future, you better learn to unlearn yourself. More than the aspect of learning, it is the aspect of unlearning which we need to inculcate when we are working in a cross-functional agile environment. And more so than ever, we see that cooperation, yes, you need to cooperate, but this concept of cooperation will take a second backseat. Why? Because as you start collaborating, this cooperation will eventually fall in place. It is like saying, if I buy the calf will come with me. However, when I only talk about cooperation, you are saying the customer indirectly that I'm not going to collaborate. Just take away whatever I have delivered, or this is what we can deliver. Today in an agile world, if something like that is happening, there is another service vendor with a quote and says that, hey, I am here to deliver whatever you want at half the price. See, finding a customer is very difficult in today's world, and that too in today's agile environment. When I say that this no as such as a word is becoming a very difficult word to understand. Now, this collaborative attitude, you will be able to say a no when it really means a no. You don't need to say yes to every twist and turn. Whereas in cooperation, you may have to restrict yourself to saying yes or no at difficult times. In a collaborative environment, you don't need to have a fake attitude. That's the takeaway from that statement. And more so than ever, I start competing. Today, they say that this guy is like how a standard 6 student is working with. This aspect of competition is anyway fading into insignificance, because competitive exams are good enough to get yourself selected. But that spirit of competition should slowly change itself into cooperation when you are in a workplace, and eventually that cooperation aspect has to translate itself into collaboration. Only then can you see value being delivered in a team. Now, the most important thing which we can understand in this is understanding one's business potential can be seen only during an ocean of turbidity. In a smooth event or time, you may not be able to see value. However, only when there is difficulty, you will be able to see value in such situation. The bottom line, it is during this transformation that the complete state of thought, as I mentioned, we will be talking about the state chart analysis in another webinar, is something that results in a complete changeover, and it talks about how situations, adaptation, looking at, and how an individual actually looks at a situation earlier and how an individual is looking at a situation present day. And that is what you call as the core grain of transformation. Yes, this is what I actually wanted to talk to you at length about. Getting right efforts versus efforts right. Now, if you see in this entire slide itself, don't you see there is a small thing which I have tried to depict in this picture itself. Getting the requirements correct versus getting the correct requirements. If you see, the correct requirements has a smooth underline, whereas the requirements correct has a broken line. The reason is, what is correct, what is the requirements that is correct today may not be correct tomorrow, whereas correct requirements will have to be right. Now, in this picture, I would want you to take a look at this to see, is this not the kind of a requirement which we are going in a day in, day out basis? How the customer actually describes his need without even thinking or without asking more probing questions, what we jump to. The aspect of questioning is strongly gone, which is something which we need to inculcate if we have to deliver value. Why? In most of these agile certification examinations or in today's environment, you need to have a W5H scenario or a syndrome. Who, what, where, when, why, and most important are how. This W5H will eventually help you to understand what is value during course of a discussion. Now, if you look at this picture, the customer says, I want a moon. And in most instances, you see customers say that I want a sun and the moon, and I want everything under the planet, and I want to have everything. See, there's no limit to a person's desire, right? And that's how the customer typically decides, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to have this for. Without thinking for the second instance, we jump to a conclusion that yes, the customer wanted to go around the skies, he wanted to see the bright moon during night, and this is what he was trying to do, right? So essentially, without even trying to understand what a customer really wanted, we jump to a conclusion. And what have we done? We tried to give him every possible aircraft. By the way, all of this is built. There's nothing that comes for free here. Everything is built, and Everything we say that in this, you'll be able to see the moon non-stop. You will be able to see the moon with a breakup journey. And with this, not only you will be able to have 500 people who can see the moon. 600, 700 customers can help you see the moon. So what it is, we go ahead, we do the sale, and the customer also says, yes, perhaps, is this what I really wanted? Because customer himself is in a zone of uncertainty where he himself is not clear about what he really wants and what he exactly wants. He knows he wants something, but the customer himself is not clear. And this is a true indication of an agile program. Because when essentially we are talking about a zone of thinking, certainty versus uncertainty, any human mind talks about requirements which are of 4 categories: known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. In an agile environment, particularly when you're creating the product backlog, the customer is in the region of an unknown unknown or maybe even an unknown known. So when you're trying to interact with the customer who is actually playing within the zones of unknown knowns and unknown unknowns, the customer himself is not clear what he needs to have as a takeaway. He has probably put it as a line item of a backlog because he had a discussion with his leadership thinking that essentially this may translate into value. And over time, when customer starts understanding the stories further, he is in the same picture of that eclipse which you saw 2 slides back. This is what the customer thought which would give him value. The slide before the black picture. Slowly as we started delivering value, customer feels this is not what I wanted, and the proceedings of the sprint is likely to be cancelled if there is no value to be taken out of the sprint. However, if some stories deliver value and if some stories really deliver value, a portion of the sprint may be accepted and some other stories which do not deliver value may go to the backlog. Essentially, this is all about the customer understanding whether his requirements are correct or is it all about correct requirements. And the next slide will talk about what the customer felt. Okay, moon. So the first thing that talks about, any candidate will be able to tell you, if it is a moon, you need a rocket. So after all these discussions, perhaps the customer came to a conclusion that is, okay, perhaps I need a rocket. If it is really the moon that I'm looking at, I need a rocket. And then he tried to understand what kind of a rocket. Is it going to be some kind of a huge rocket having this much distance that needs to be covered? The rocket needs to have this much of thrust and other technical specifications which a rocket should have. And he tries to get into some rocket science because he's trying to uncover more and more. And he thought perhaps a rocket may be the solution to his challenge. The 4th slide, don't be surprised. All that he wanted was sitting in a place and visualizing the beauty of the moon. When did he realize that? He or she realized that? He has realized that when he saw that if this series of aircraft which you have provided to the customers and if these rocket propellant and systems which you provided to the customer did not deliver the value which the customer and the stakeholders did not get, what is it that he really wanted? They all sat down, put all their gray cells together, and eventually they understood that they needed a tripod stand and a telescope. It is good enough if they can sit in their place, enjoy the beauty of the moon. Does this not say the clear distinction between getting correct requirements versus requirements right? I can have one more example, but for brevity in time, we will try to understand some core aspects of this chain reaction and how this chain reaction essentially gives rise to what you call as an agile manifesto, and why is this agile manifesto carved in such a way that it delivers value. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is what we would want to do as an aspect of retrospective. Essentially, the word retrospective is from the Greek word retro, which is backward, and specter, meaning vision. Now, at the end of the day, typically we sit back and say, did this day go well? What have we done? What could we have done to avoid that challenge? So, coming back to the same customer requirement of telescope versus rocket versus the moon, we understood, did we have the correct requirements for the business, or were we self-satisfied, meaning complacent on our past glories? I have done this kind of work for a previous customer, so this requirement is going to work well for this customer, and hence this customer wanted that, I'm going to stereotype for this customer A to customer B. That was a blunder. Eventually, what worked well for customer A need not work well for customer B. The second thing, if we talk about the correct questions, you remember
we spoke, the customer described the moon, and what were we thinking? The customer wanted to travel the entire circumference of the earth, seeing the beauty of the moon as he was traveling in an aircraft. Did we ask the correct questions to probe the entire breadth and length of the business possibilities? And at this point in time, many a time, the third thing is a very, very dicey statement, where we actually wishing with our customer that this possibility we better not ask. Because if we ask for that possibility, it will mean more work for us. And unnecessarily, we will be paid less and we will be doing more work. The whole idea is, let us try to understand this life rule. Unavoidable sorrows never become joys just by mere postponement. It will dawn upon us at the most inopportune activity. Just because something is becoming a pain today need not say that that pain is going to be a pain forever. Eventually, this is what will change over time. And at this point in time, it is imperative that we sit with our customer to understand, is this exactly what you want? Hey, customer, now that we have delivered this portion of the code, now that this is what we have delivered at this point of activity, let us try to understand, are you happy, or do you think this will add value? There are times when the customers will try to misuse you. Yes, I am not denying that possibility. However, at a point in time, this maturity aspect becomes so high that we will start thinking beyond the billing line item concept within which most of our industries are tied. We start thinking only of billing and line item. We will not be able to break beyond that. And the agile philosophy breaks barriers beyond the billing and line item. So that is where the aspect of customer transformation comes into picture. Did we help our customer transform his mindset to come up and think up with a list of features, and have we helped the customer pursue activities and come up with the end product backlog that he really wanted? And more so than ever, we are always used to nod our head towards customer, right? Did we challenge the customer saying that, no, I will not do this because it cannot be done in this way? How many times did we argue and put our foot firm and say, no, this cannot be done? And how many times have we meekly agreed to whatever our customer says? Because we are afraid of losing business. See, at one point in time, if we are not able to take risk, that risk itself becomes a bigger risk. Eventually, during the closure of this session, I'll come back to one slide which I wanted to show during the earlier session. And then with that in session, we'll go ahead and we will take the session to a closure. And more said than ever, we are going to talk about thought leadership. Every time we keep saying that you should exercise thought leadership to a customer. If we did not do any of these 6 points mentioned above, where are we going to bring in the aspect of thought leadership, and how are you going to actually draw a line of demarcation between wants and exact needs? A want, what a customer says, I need this. Exact needs, what is needed at that point in time. This is the fine line of difference between requirements correct versus correct requirements. Please dwell on this slide for a minute. I would want to talk about this concept of a chain reaction before I get into this slide. This is actually the Agile Manifesto rearranged in such a way that it actually translates itself into value-based delivery. This individuals and interactions or process and tools. Let's say I was actually talking to you about a project manager coming and sending across an email to all the 25 members saying that I want this line item A, line item B, line item C to get done. Versus a project manager or person, a scrum master or a servant leader coming and saying, I will need this to get this done in another 3 days down the line. I will be sending across an email marking some key stakeholders who will be interested in understanding what you people have delivered, because it will keep them posted on the loop, right? Post all these things, how good will you feel versus a person not having any face-to-face interaction versus a person having a face-to-face interaction and sending across an email, which is going to be an added reference. That is where this individual interactions over processes and tools gets into picture. Today's social media actually talks a lot about individuals and interactions. However, the bottom line crux in today's social media is such that social media has made us less social and more of an animal. We have become more addicted to processes and tools than individuals and interactions. And because that individual and interaction aspect is missing, what happens is customers don't clearly understand, or customers don't get the real picture of what you are trying to describe. And if you are able to overcome that, mind you, all of these are guidelines to ensure how we can make ourselves better individuals, which is a core strata of transformation. And the core strata of transformation is helping ourselves trying to find the fine line of difference between knowns and unknowns. And this knowns and unknowns is what you have in trying to understand what is customer cooperation versus what is customer collaboration. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools successfully executed eventually translates itself into customer collaboration. And when you start collaborating with customers, yes, customers do tend to take you for granted. They may give you more work, they may not pay you. All of that is fine, but that is perfectly momentary. It is not going to continue for a life, because each of these line items are going to be retrospectives on how you can work with difficult customers, easy customers, and customers who do not know absolutely a thing on what they are going to work on or what they think as value. Because you have got individuals and interactions over processes and tools, which has eventually translated itself into customer collaboration over contract negotiation or customer cooperation. The third thing that happens is responding to change or following a detailed plan. Here, the point to be noted is there is response to change and it is not reactivity to change. Because you have responsiveness to change factor, what happens is you have working software over comprehensive documentation. The sad reality is in today's world, everybody only wants line item 4 without looking at above 3 line items. I popularly hear many of my people talk in seminars, but my mentor told me one thing very clearly. He says, Seshadri, remember one thing, 9 agile coaches cannot work with a couple for 9 hours and get a baby delivered within 9 minutes or 9 seconds. It's just not going to happen, because that is what you call as a course of time. It will take its own course of time from where you have the learning cycles, acquirement cycles, fulfillment cycles. This is what you have a learning cycle in project management, which is called as a forming cycle, storming cycle, norming cycle, performing cycle, and an adjourning cycle. Eventually, these 5 aspects of an individual during course of any interaction is what is summarized as an individuals and interactions over processes and tools, customer collaboration versus contract negotiation or customer cooperation. Contract negotiations, once again, an aspect of customer cooperation. You need to customer needs to cooperate, right? Responding to change or following a detailed plan, because customer himself does not know what needs to be done. Where is a question of a detailed plan that a customer can draw out? And after all these things, the customer himself gravitates from a region of proven uncertainty towards a certain level of certainty, where the customer has moved away from a region of blackness, which you saw in that eclipse picture, towards a region of an annular lighting versus complete lighting. Now, following to this is what I would like to talk about, a chain reaction. This is something which we have read in high school, right? A nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon, and which is something which, if not channelized properly, can lead to devastation, destruction, and more said than ever, things will not be set right even after the source of the problem has occurred or has been removed, right? Now, if I have to translate this to the concept of a chain reaction, something in excess is always going to be a problem. There needs to be a balance between work and life, and there needs to be a balance between self-organizing team versus a command control team. Self-organizing teams have a high level of maturity. In other words, they are not eye servants. Who is an eye servant? A person who works only when you are looking at him, not when you are not working at him. A self-organizing team has a large level of discipline. A self-organizing team understands that it is beyond value that I am working for today. And more said than ever, a self-organizing team knows that what I take away as knowledge in today's work is something that I may not be able to put in use tomorrow, but I can definitely put it in use well within the next 10 years. And at that point in time, there's immense value that I'm going to deliver to my customers. And that is there the concept of the orientation of neutrons within a nuclear reactor versus an atomic explosion comes into picture. An unchannelized energy which results in a complete fission reaction is the outcome of a nuclear bomb, which is a destructive weapon. However, the same neutrons where you are having a servant leader, control, guide, coach, mentor, the neutrons, saying that, hey, no, your neutrons can be destructive. You can revert to your earlier state. However, the outcome of this reaction needs to be translated in such a way that it can be to the benefit of the entire community. It becomes a nuclear reactor. I'm not getting into the physics of a nuclear reactor. That's anyway a different thing under the state chart analysis, which I'll be presenting later, as I mentioned. And this is what I want all of our participants to think over. Stability factor of an organization is a relative challenging one during an aspect of transformation. Meaning, the cone of uncertainty is very high. What is the meaning of this cone of uncertainty? The cone of uncertainty essentially talks about how, what, where I promised to customer and what is it I'm doing today. And if the customer was promised the sun and moon, and today if he did not even have the place where a rocket is manufactured, the customer is not going to be happy about this, or he's not going to be excited. He's going to yell at you, and chances are high that he may sue you. So never make promises when you are not very sure on what the outcome of the business is going to be. In other words, the only promise that I can make is we will stay sure, we will stay put, we can stay aligned towards your business needs and goals, provided we can, the two can collaborate and ensure that value is being delivered at the end of the exercise. Now, the second thing is, many a time team members think this is not going to work. Let me start looking out elsewhere. This opportunities does not seem to be giving what I really wanted. Now, the third thing is too much of dynamic requirements and shifting of work opportunities also as an intersection of change and the resistance to change by the team members. You see here, the intersection of the three components in the Venn diagram is what you see as a success factor. Now, I'll go back to the third slide in the beginning of our session. This is the only thing which I actually wanted to have as a reserve. Change, the only perennial entity in this universe. And this has been upheld as the Kala Chakra in the universe. The changing wheel of time. Time, tide, wait for none, right? And what is this change and persistence? More than the aspect of learning, the aspect of unlearning is very, very important. If you thought I can fight tomorrow's war with weapons that existed 1,000 years ago, it's highly imperative that we will fail this war. You need to adapt yourself towards changing requirements. And the third thing is, tough times never last, and tough characters do. Technologies can always fail you. The reason is, what was Java yesterday may become Kava, and the Kava can become Lava or Mava. However, that has no serene fitment on whether it's going to change or not change. But the other takeaway here, which you can see here, a do and a while looping statement structures can be misplaced. However, if the people start wasting away their time, which is what I've indicated in the whiling away, you are in real trouble. And unavoidable sorrows never become joy by mere postponement. In other words, as I spoken some time back in one of the slides, just because the customer did not ask for it, you thought you could get away with it. It so happened that in the 15th sprint, you saw that that was the requirement which we did not want our customer to ask. However, the product owner changed the position and he asked, where is this requirement? Don't you guys know that this has to be done in furtherance to what we have done? What happens? 13 sprints are gone. Rework on the 13 sprints and then half the payment and burning the midnight oil. Instead, if you had opened it, it would have just meant work for that 1 or 2 sprints. You would have saved the work for the remaining 11 sprints. You could have been happy. And that is where the resultant factor is more debt in the karma factor, technical or in customer relationships, and the ones that have to come up. So let me run towards the summary of the slide where what is it that I have as a takeaway from this entire transformation agenda? What are the learning lessons? What are my outcome of the retrospectives? How am I going to track the action items? It is good to have retrospectives, but it's better and it's the best if action items to retrospectives are assigned to people by the servant leader and it has to be tracked to closure within the subsequent 2 or 3 sprints. I want my people to ensure that the best practice is all about understanding is, I can do this, yes. Can we do this together? By the way, I can do it becomes an individual play. Can we do it becomes a game changer where an individual is transforming himself into understanding that it is not about my efforts alone. It's about a collective team efforts. And people think that I have not taken risk. That no risk by itself is a huge risk because it pertains a high level of uncertainty. I have not been accustomed to changing this level of risk, and that can result in a lot of challenge in the program. And the fourth thing is, this is same uranium which can be transformed either into a lethal weapon or into a reactor. The discretion is binary. So this is what our master Oogway has to say, both to the Kung Fu Panda and to the Lion King. There are no failures. There are only retrospectives. With these few thoughts, I would invite you all to connect with me on social media channels as appropriate. I know people from the Knowledgehut will be sharing the details of this presentation to you all, and maybe you can get connected with me in some time from now. And my best wishes.